Okay, so welcome to the deep dive. Now, today we're really going to kind of pull back the curtain on OnlyFans. I feel like everybody's heard of it.
Oh, yeah.
And there's all this hype about it, and a lot of times it's, shown as like a way to make easy money.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what we're going to do is we're going to use this fictional podcast called OnlyFans Unfiltered, the dark side of selling your life,
Okay.
as our kind of jumping off point to look at some of the realities for creators on the platform. And, we're not trying to, disparage OnlyFans or anything like that. But we are going to kind of dig into some of the things that maybe people don't always talk about.
That's right. I think that's the thing, is that the conversation always starts with the idea of using money.
Right.
But what we're going to do today is really unpack why that perception is often so different from what creators actually experience day to day. And we'll use the podcast as a way to do that.
Yeah. And just to give a little bit of background for anyone who might not be, super familiar with OnlyFans, it's basically a platform where creators offer exclusive content to their subscribers for a fee. And that content can range from, fitness routines or culinary creations to, adult-oriented material.
Right.
But the main idea is that it's often portrayed as like this kind of instant path to, financial security.
Right.
You post a few things and all of a sudden you're rich.
And what really comes out when you look closer is the difference between that image and the actual work involved.
Mm-hmm.
Because these creators, they're not just uploading content. They're actually running their own businesses. They have to market themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They have to engage with their subscribers. They have to create a constant flow of new content to keep those subscriptions up.
Exactly. It's not like a passive hobby that's making them money. They're really hustling.
Absolutely.
They're building a brand, they're managing customer relationships, and they're navigating a super competitive online environment. And the source that we're looking at talks a lot about creator burnout. And it's not hard to see why with, all the different things they have to do.
Yeah, and across the creator economy, there's this narrative about overnight success, but it really overshadows the work it actually takes to build the sustainable income online. I mean, the podcast we're using for this deep dive cites that only a tiny percentage,
Right.
like 1% of OnlyFans creators actually achieve what you would consider big financial success. Most of them are earning a lot less while struggling to get noticed by the platform's algorithms.
Right.
It's really top heavy.
Yeah. And then you add on top of that there's this blurring of work and personal life.
Yeah.
Your income literally depends on how you present yourself online and how much you interact with your subscribers. So I think a really good example that the source material uses of that. There's this creator named Sarah who was facing these constant demands for, personalized voice messages, immediate replies. It's almost like she's perpetually on call.
Right.
And that just sounds so draining.
It does, and it really raises that question of boundaries.
Yeah.
When your personal life becomes a product, where do you draw the line?
Right.
The emotional toll of always needing validation through likes and subscriptions, it's got to be huge. The source even uses the analogy of feeling like a 24/7 vending machine for validation, which really drives home that potential psychological impact.
It does, and it makes you wonder, like, how do you switch off? How do you go from being that online persona that you're using to make money back to just being you in your private life?
Right. How do you separate the two?
Exactly.
And then you add in the fact that there isn't real anonymity.
Yeah.
And that opens up some scary risks.
Right.
But our source talks about situations where fans have actually tracked down creators in real life,
Right.
leading to stalking and stuff.
Right.
That takes away any control a creator might have over their public and private life.
Yeah. Yeah. That's super creepy. And then it brings us to the whole other aspect of, online content creation, which is these privacy nightmares.
Yes.
Our source gets into content leaks, private photos and videos being stolen, reposted on other websites without their consent, spread all over the internet.
Right.
And it's like a huge violation of trust.
Yeah, it is. And what's really worrying is what the source points out about the long-term impact.
Yeah.
Even if you decide to quit OnlyFans, any leaked content just stays online forever. Imagine how that could affect future jobs, relationships, your whole online footprint.
Right.
The cybersecurity expert in the podcast even warns, operate under the assumption that anything you post online could become public.
Wow. So it really makes you rethink that whole idea of empowerment that's
Yeah.
often associated with platforms like OnlyFans. If you're always worried about your private stuff getting out. Does it really feel empowering?
Right. It seems like it adds a lot of vulnerability to it.
It does.
If you connect that to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
it makes you really think about the true cost of online visibility these days. The potential loss of privacy is a big thing that sometimes gets missed in all the excitement about online freedom and the creator economy.
Yeah, and another myth that we should probably bust is that everyone on OnlyFans is making a ton of money.
Oh, yeah.
Our source actually gives a much more realistic view. It says that most creators have to spend a lot of money just to stay competitive. Things like promotions, special equipment, even specific clothes.
Yes.
It's not just about the content itself, it's about the whole package. The presentation, the marketing.
Yeah. And we haven't even touched on the less glamorous parts of income like taxes.
Right.
There's a story in the source about someone who made $50,000 but then had to pay $15,000 in taxes.
Wow.
It really shows how what might seem like a good income can be much less after deductions.
Exactly.
Being your own boss means handling all the financial stuff yourself.
Right. And then there's the instability of relying on a single platform. Our source mentions the very real possibility of getting banned or suspended without any clear reason or a way to appeal.
Right.
Imagine your main income just vanishing overnight. That's a level of financial risk that doesn't get talked about in the success stories.
It's like building your whole business on rented land. The landlord can change the rules or kick you out whenever they want.
Right.
It raises an important point about income security for creators online. Relying on just one platform can be super risky, especially when the rules can change out of the blue. Diversifying as much as you can becomes really important.
Okay, so let's do a little myth busting here based on what our source is telling us. One common misconception is that OnlyFans is only for adult content.
Yep.
So what's the real story there?
Well, it's true that adult content is a big part of the platform and attracts a lot of users. There are definitely creators in other areas too, like fitness instructors, chefs, sharing recipes, artists showing their work. But it's important to acknowledge, like the source does, that the platform's reputation and what subscribers expect are very much geared towards more explicit material.
Right.
So while there are other options, the main culture of the platform leans in a specific direction.
Right.
And that can affect how visible and successful non-adult creators are.
And another myth is this idea that creators on OnlyFans are just taking it easy.
Oh, yeah.
Making tons of money without much work. Let's break that down.
That couldn't be further from the truth. Our source makes it clear that being successful on OnlyFans takes a lot of time. It's not just about creating the content itself.
Right.
It's also about constantly interacting with subscribers through DMs, editing photos and videos, which takes time, and managing their online presence and promotion, which often goes unnoticed. The source even mentions creators who put in over 40 hours a week on all these different tasks.
Wow.
It really is like a full-time job, often without the usual benefits and security.
Yeah, and I think what really brings this home is that the source shares some really insightful listener experiences from that fictional podcast.
Oh, yeah.
It kind of grounds all these issues in personal stories. There's one example of someone who decided to leave the platform after their family found out about their page.
Oh, wow.
Which led to some super awkward and difficult situations. It really shows the real-world social impact that creators can face outside of their online lives.
Absolutely. These personal stories are so important because they highlight the human side of these online profiles.
Right.
They remind us that creators aren't just digital avatars. They have families, friends, lives that go beyond the platform. And their online work can have real and sometimes tough consequences in those offline areas.
So considering all these challenges, what potential solutions does our source offer to help creators navigate this tricky situation?
Well, first off, there needs to be a much stronger legal system to protect online creators, especially when it comes to content theft and people sharing their work without permission.
Right.
Mental health resources specifically for creators are also crucial. They face unique pressures and experiences.
Right.
And of course, the platforms themselves need to be more proactive and responsible about content leaks and creator safety.
Absolutely.
And we can't forget about societal attitudes. The stigma and judgment that creators face can really hurt their mental health and self-worth. We need a bigger societal shift in how we understand and talk about online content creation as a form of work.
It prompts an important reflection for everyone listening. we should examine our own assumptions about online work. It's a key step in creating a more supportive and understanding environment for people working in the creator economy.
Absolutely.
So for anyone out there thinking about joining OnlyFans, what's the main advice that our source gives?
The key takeaways are do your research. Understand both the potential rewards and the risks involved. Set really clear boundaries from the start to protect your personal life and your mental health. And maybe most importantly, have a plan for how you might leave the platform in the future.
Okay.
It's just as important as the decision to join. It's about going in with your eyes wide open and having strategies to handle the complexities.
Okay, so as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, it's pretty clear that the reality of being a creator on OnlyFans is much more complex and demanding than the whole easy money thing suggests. It often involves a lot of work, a lot of emotional and psychological pressure, real privacy risks, and financial uncertainty for most creators.
Yeah, what's really key here for everyone is to think about the human side of online content creation. Beyond the subscriptions and the polished feeds, there's real effort, real vulnerability, real people's lives.
Right.
Hopefully, this deep dive has given you a more balanced view of the creator economy as a whole
Yeah.
and encourages you to consider the work and the potential risks that exist behind